Every one of us is pursuing something, whether that be Hamlet's revenge against his uncle, the equality for the First Nations we read about in our poetry lessons, or the pursuit of wealth and happiness, as in The Great Gatsby. We all desire and long for something. For this final assignment, I decided to create a documentary of some friends' journeys as they pursued comfort, acceptance, love, and fulfillment through the material things the world had to offer, before finding their true fulfillment in God. I decided to tell their story as it lines up pretty closely to my own. I tried to find my worth and acceptance in the other people around me, before realizing I needed God all along. It was only when I truly sought the Lord did I understand that He loves me unconditionally, and He made me for a reason. I now desire to live a life of praise and to measure out my days, knowing that this life is only a blink, and that the time in heaven is going to be for eternity. It makes my heart stir knowing that the people crossing my path every day do not know the love and longing our God has for them. My hope is that this documentary can serve as a gospel message to those around me, to show others that the pursuits of this world tells us that we need will never truly satisfy us. It is only when we seek the Lord that our true joy and fulfillment comes.
Before I found Jesus, I was pursuing kind of the standard checklist of things we're kind of taught to pursue in life. You know, I wanted a house, a career, wife, 2.7 children, those kinds of things. And I was just kind of living the life of like a standard young person, I guess you could say, working all week, partying on the weekends, and just kind of going through the motions. It really made me feel, though, that there was always something more that I had to have. Like I was never fulfilled by any of that. I always felt that my happiness would be found after the next milestone, you know, after the next promotion, after the next big thing on that list. And that feeling of unsatisfaction eventually led me to completely change careers and move cities to try and pursue something that was really going to be fulfilling for me. But even that was not the piece that I was missing.
I was really pursuing my own comfort. I was at Bible college and I thought I was pursuing God and thought I was doing really great for myself, but I couldn't give everything to God and had basically had a massive collapse. I'd become an alcoholic. I was on my own, so it was even easier to just hide in my room and spend all my time there, pretty much gone. And then when I was hanging out with people, it was just to party and to drink and do whatever I wanted to do.
I was pursuing my pleasures, just like in any way or any facet that I could, basically. Drinking was like a huge one for me. It was a way of escape, but also just like pleasure in travel. Josh and I planned a lot of trips. We spent a lot of money traveling, probably more than we could even afford or should have spent. And then pleasure in relationships also. Pursuing those things left me feeling really empty because it lasts for a little while. It's like when you go shopping and you buy something and you get that rush and that excitement of something new, but then like 2 days later, you're not really excited about that thing anymore. But it's like that for every single thing that you're doing and pursuing. Basically, I got to like a really, really low point because I had been drinking so much and I was needing more and more to just feel good and feel normal. And this was also during COVID. So like we were in lockdown and I was working from home and I wasn't seeing people. And so I was literally just living for alcohol, looking forward to when we could travel again and hanging out with my husband in the evening. And we pretty much just watched TV or movies every night and drank.
My parents were never terrible to us per se, but I didn't feel loved. All the things that they did for me did not give me the feeling of being loved. Because there was something in my core that just, you know, from the very beginning, it was like, I didn't think I was lovable. So then in my teens, I totally turned my back on Jesus. And I was like, you know what? I'm not into this guy at all. Because I found out about deathbed conversions. And I was like, no, if somebody who's been doing stuff wrong their whole life, just in jail or something, then decides that they're going to accept Jesus. If that's what Christianity is about, I don't want anything to do with it. When I was 17, I was like so desperate to have friends at school. I decided I was going to become a smoker. So that weekend I smoked until, and I smoked like a whole pack during that camping trip to like figure out how to smoke properly. Because I was like, I'm gonna smoke so that I have a place to be when I go to school. Like I go to the smoke pit. I was 26 by now, and I was a functioning alcoholic and living in Thunder Bay. We had furniture from the brick. I had a full-time job. I had the fiance. We were functioning alcoholics. It was like, okay, like we had an apartment, we had a cat, like we had all the stuff-ish, you know? I don't need a lot. We had a life, right? And I was really terribly unhappy. So I just looked up to the ceiling one day and said, whoever can hear me, aliens, my dead grandfather, God, whoever, if anybody can hear me, I want you to know I'm going to kill myself a week today. It was a Sunday. I said, I'm going to kill myself a week today, because if this is all there is to life, at 26 years old, I'm not having it. I'm not into it. It's not worth living if this is the extent of what life gives you.
A friend of mine started sharing with me about their faith and about what Jesus had done for them. So at that time, I realized that I'd never really considered the existence of God, or I'd never really considered what my relationship with Him is like, or what it should be. So I came down to church, and during worship, I remember worshiping and singing, and Jesus just really revealed Himself to me and revealed to me the love that He has for me. And that's when things started to change for me. He showed me that His promises are enough, and who He is and what He's done for me is enough, and that I don't need to be seeking all these material possessions. I don't need to be chasing after things that society tells us we should chase after. All I need is Him.
3 years ago, my brother decided he was looking for a good Bible study, and he finally found one that was going to go throughout the summer. It was just like preaching the actual gospel, and I was sitting there listening and shocked at these things that I'd heard before, but just like it was hitting me differently. And I remember at the end thinking, I didn't really like the people there, but the message was quite good. I would come again. So I went the following Monday and the following Monday after that. And the more I went, the more I realized this stuff is actually changing me. And I actually opened myself up to talking to God again. And I told Him, okay, I'll give you everything this time. The things that I loved and desired, I was like, and my comfort especially, I was like, I want all of these things, but God, if you want me more, then change my desires so I want you. And He did, and it has been a long process of sanctification.
One morning I woke up and I just could see this like really quickly going downhill path that I was on. And it really scared me because I didn't want to be on that path, and I didn't want to go where that path was leading. And I knew that if nothing changed, then I would. But I really didn't know what to do about it. Like I couldn't imagine giving up alcohol. I couldn't imagine any kind of way out. And then just as I was thinking about this, it just popped into my head, like, God promised that He would be your satisfaction. And I was like, oh, I believe that's true. But how do I live like that's true? Like my life doesn't look like I believe that's true. If I really believed it, then I would act like I believed it. And so I just prayed, and I told Him I was so scared, but that I didn't want to do this anymore. And I didn't know how to stop, and I needed His help. And I kind of had just this image in my mind of like holding all of these objects and all these things that I was finding pleasure in, I was finding happiness in, the things that I mentioned earlier. And I was looking down at them and considering what it would be like to not have them in my life. And then I looked up and I just saw the cross over there. And I just thought, okay, I'll act like it's true, but God, you have to help me because I'm really, really scared. And so I just like visualized putting all that stuff down and then just like kind of turning the other way and saying, God, I trust you. And then I vowed to give up alcohol for a year. If I could do a year, then that meant that God had kept me through that year and he could keep me going. And he did. And then just like, looking back, I think that moment was the first time I had ever repented, ever turned from my sin and to God. And the first time that I'd ever trusted that he was going to fulfill his promises. And I think that was the moment that he saved me.
It was my last appointment with a counselor, and she gave me this book. It's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And it talked about hope. And so, I think that's something I've been searching for my whole life too, is hope, right? Something heard me, and there was hope, right? And I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know what the hope was. All I knew is something heard me. I was going to give life another try, and I did. So I broke up with my fiance, and I moved back to BC, and I signed up to go to college, and I decided I wanted to help people, so I was going to be a human service worker. And I did. And I came back to BC, and I went to college. And then I got in a relationship with a guy that I met through Narcotics Anonymous, the 12-step program. He was also really abusive. So one day, our CMP officer asked me to come in, and he wanted me to write a statement against my ex-boyfriend, because I had 2 black eyes at the time. I said no, I wasn't going to write a statement. And then he told me the only way that I was going to get out of abusive relationships was if I got Jesus in a hobby. When he set aside the whole thing and he just told me about what kind of churches in Kelowna have the real Jesus in them and preach the real Bible. And he told me about 4 of them. I will visit each one of these churches because of this guy's mercy upon me. I will investigate this and see if it really is true. It was the last church, and it was that one that my parents had actually been going to. All I know was the living God was in that building. I felt the presence of God so heavy in that building. It was 2005. It was the week of Valentine's, and I accepted Jesus. I believed he was the Son of God who died for my sins, and I could find forgiveness through him.
Now, when things get hard, I turn to him. Before, I would turn to some other unhealthy coping mechanism, drinking, or just some other kind of destructive way to cope with problems, way to cope with failure or feelings of low self-esteem. Now, when those times come, I turn to Jesus. And so my desire now is no longer to tick the boxes on that checklist, but my desire is to just know him better and grow closer to him and to help me better understand what it is he's done for me and what he saved me from.
So how I seek comfort now is very different from how I did before, because rather than immediately jumping to movies or books or whatever fantasy world I was creating for myself, it's now, okay, God, you are able to satisfy everything. So I have to go to him, and in prayer and in reading the word and spending time with other believers, it's just so much more comforting. I quit drinking 3 years ago, which was it was important. It's one of the first things that God asked me to do. And I didn't realize how important it would be until like a few months in, and I could start thinking clearly again. And I was like, oh, whoa, I had no idea it affected my everyday life. And all of a sudden I could think clearly, and I was able to actually assess, okay, how am I spending my time? What can I be doing instead of the regular jumps to comfort? And it was just so much easier to realize that the word was what I needed and God is what I needed, rather than alcohol or books or movies or whatever I was using for comfort.
God changed my desires. Like, my desire all of a sudden was for reading my Bible and praying and spending time with other believers, especially spending time with other believers. I was just really hungry for spiritual conversation and for knowledge and understanding about God. And I had a new desire to tell people about Him. And I had desires to be out in nature. And actually, just an aside, one really cool thing that He did in me, I've never been an animal lover. Like I'm not very drawn to animals. But I was driving one day, I was in a passenger of the car one day, and I was looking out at the field, and there was this cow in the field, and it just turned its head a little bit, and my heart swelled, and I was like, that is the cutest thing I've ever seen. And I never thought cows were cute before. Like, I just had a brand new appreciation for creation. Like, He just put that in me. It wasn't there before, and it hasn't left.
I found out that I was loved as a child. I didn't know that, but my parents did love me, but I just couldn't receive the love. I was pursuing belonging, and I was pursuing acceptance through the world, but I did not find it. I didn't, and if I did find it, it didn't do me any good. It just destroyed me. After Jesus, I was able to find all those things. Well, first of all, hope, which is the first thing you need, so I wasn't suicidal anymore. And then two, my identity, because who He tells me I am in Him, and that just gets rid of all the shame, and the guilt about everything I've done, because I needed, after trying to find everything in the world, I needed something to get rid of the damage that the world had done to me on top of it. So the healing, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, and then now I find my fulfillment in Him. Honestly, I mean, it might sound a little strange, but I do. Like, I just do. I not only know about Him, but I know Him personally. Yeah.
The difference between before seeking pleasure being everything to me, and now God being everything to me, is He's given me a future kingdom mindset. Like, my worldview has changed. So instead of being so concerned with how I feel in every moment, I'm concerned with eternity, and I'm concerned with His goals. I'm concerned with the eternity of other people. I'm concerned with, am I pleasing God instead of am I pleasing people, or am I pleasing myself? I think He did that in me just because He gave me a new heart, and that was part of it, but also because as I learn more about Him, I love Him more, and I want to desire Him more, and I want to live a life that gives Him more glory and honor, because He is so holy and wonderful and majestic and satisfying and just incomparable and indescribable. I feel like I can't even do it justice, really, how good He is.
That thing that I just knew that I was missing, I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it was missing. That whole time, though, throughout those years of my life when I was seeking it, and Jesus was the answer the whole time. And it took me about 1 second to realize that when it finally happened.